What's up, guys? Aaron Feely for White Sox Daily back once again with more White Sox news. Got a little bit more concrete stuff today as the Chicago White Sox obviously in the midst still of, kind of the slow point of the offseason, but things are starting to ramp up now. A couple more names flying off that free agency board. We got a trade today, among all things. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and jump right on into the news. And the big one, of course, they finalized the coaching staff yesterday, so that was huge news. And now they're adding to the Chicago White Sox front office staff once again, and a move that kind of brings a little bit of optimism toward the direction that the Chicago White Sox might be heading as they continue kind of this borderline small market style approach to their rebuild, kind of trying to take a Tampa Bay Rays approach, and they go even further in doing so by bringing on Carlos Rodriguez to be the new assistant general manager for the Chicago White Sox. He was also the assistant general manager in that exact same role for the Tampa Bay Rays since 2021. He's been with the Rays organization for the last 15 years, working his way up the scouting department. Started off as an area scout, getting up to regional scout, scouting director, assistant general manager since 2021, as we mentioned, and now he joins the Chicago White Sox in the same role. So kind of a big get there for Chicago. Obviously, Tampa Bay, a team that, if you're talking about working under the confines of a restrained budget, Tampa Bay is one of the blueprints on how to do that successfully over these last few years. Not that far removed from a big, obviously, playoff run that they had not that long ago. Um, and yeah, the Chicago White Sox will bring in Rodriguez, who they're hoping will help them in getting this rebuild finished up, get the Chicago White Sox back where they want to be. He will make for the third assistant general manager in the Chicago White Sox organization alongside Josh Barfield and Jin Wong. As obviously the White Sox continue to look for any and all assistance to the general manager Chris Getz that they can get in order to, just hear a whole bunch of perspectives, whole bunch of different scouting heads. Again, when you're talking about a team that has to work under certain restrictions as far as what their budget is going to be, as far as signing players, getting big names in here, it's probably not going to be that high up there as far as what you're able to do in free agency. So it's always key to have as much top end scouting help as you can get, especially with the premier draft picks that the Chicago White Sox now find themselves in the possession of. And moving right on along there, another big connection with Tampa Bay taking place earlier on today as the Chicago White Sox have finalized a trade. They will be sending a player to be named later or cash considerations to Tampa Bay in exchange for outfield prospect Tristan Peters, kind of a high upside type of player. And honestly, one to maybe keep an eye on here. He's 25 years old, coming off a season where he was batting .266 down in AAA. And he showcased a bit of power as well. 28 doubles, 3 triples, 15 home runs, batted in 76 RBIs, scored 73 runs, took 65 walks, stole 11 bases. He was a guy that was really a rock-solid player for them down in AAA. And a guy that flashed some really excellent defense as well for him. Robbed a number of home runs, including one on their major league roster. Now, in the 4 games he appeared for Tampa Bay last year on the actual Rays roster, he did go 0 for 12 from the plate. 7 of those were strikeouts, so that's obviously something that must improve. He's going to have to get used to seeing big league pitching in order to make any kind of noise for Chicago. But it's certainly a trade that was worth exploring, especially for such a low price. Kind of a bargain there to get a guy that can flash defensively, has some upside as far as the power he's capable of bringing from the plate. But like with a lot of these Chicago White Sox prospects, We've been preached patience for so many years when we bring some of these guys in. We hear about what they're doing down in AAA, and then it just doesn't pan out when they get up to the big leagues. So this could be another case of a, career 4A type of player, or maybe this could be one of the diamonds in the rough that Chicago is finally able to unlock. I like the trade personally, especially when you consider the cost. Certainly something that the Chicago White Sox may as well take a swing at, take a flyer on a guy like Tristan Peters and see what he turns into. And then moving right on along here, something that the Chicago White Sox have been focused on all offseason, bringing in more pitchers, both starting and, of course, relief pitchers. Chris Getz talking a number of times about wanting high leverage guys and guys that can eat innings. And so once again, we, kind of have to grit our teeth a little bit as we announce yet another one of last year's pitchers that maybe some Chicago White Sox fans might have thought, if all else fails, you can't sign one of the big names. Just bring some people back. Obviously a lot of these pitchers ended up being free agents. Let's bring a couple back. We've seen a number of them now signed elsewhere, and we've got yet another one to report here. Dan Altavilla ended up signing with the Minnesota Twins after having kind of a breakout year last year, a career minor league player, 33 years old as for opening day this coming season. So not a guy that, still has a great deal of upside, not a guy with some fantastic career legacy that you'd want to bring back, but a guy that did end up having his best season and a bit of a breakout last year for us in Chicago. Ended up pitching to the tune of a 2.48 ERA in the appearances he did make for the White Sox. And I mean, it's still rough to see a guy finally break through that glass ceiling there, finally break into that upper echelon of his potential, and then immediately in an offseason where the White Sox are desperately trying to find any sort of pitching help that they can possibly muster, one of the guys that was actually pretty solid for us last year ends up going to a division rival. So go figure on that one. He's going to end up going to Minnesota here as we try to look at the details of the contract. Of course, he was also with the Kansas City Royals in 2024, so he's bouncing all over the place here in the American League Central. As we're still looking here, doesn't look like the full details of the contract have yet been leaked, just that he has signed with what is right now a minor league contract, with the expectation being that he's going to work his way up to the Twins' major league roster sooner rather than later. And speaking of pitching, some optimism on the horizon. Just a little bit of good news, White Sox fans, moving forward as far as the pitching free agent market is concerned, as Jeff Passan's recent article on ESPN talked about kind of what the mid-tier of free agent pitching and the teams that are going to be in the market for players in that tier. And a lot of White Sox fans were starting to kind of give up hope that they would be involved in any free agency at this point. They're just not looking like they're going to be spending much, especially if their name, as we have been rumored and hearing about, are in on, maybe some of these Japanese players coming over. We've heard a couple of infielders' names linked to the Chicago White Sox. What does that leave budget-wise for this starting pitching rotation, where we only have 3 names really locked in for the White Sox roster come opening day of 2026? But they were the first team mentioned in Passan's article, saying truly every team could target this tier, but those who will be most aggressive in their pursuit, according to sources, the Chicago White Sox, as well as the Baltimore Orioles, Los Angeles Angels, Washington Nationals, New York Mets, San Diego Padres, and Arizona Diamondbacks. But fascinating that the Chicago White Sox were the first team named in that tier. Speaking of the players in that tier, he specifically mentions Chris Bassett, who was just pitching for the American League champion Toronto Blue Jays last season. Familiar name, Lucas Giolito, Nick Martinez also on there, Zach Littell, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, and a couple of other names as well. And so some names to watch there for the Chicago White Sox, as we hope that they will be at least mildly aggressive in adding to the starting pitching rotation that desperately needs some help going in to 2026. That'll do it, though, for tonight's episode. Hoping everyone has a happy holidays, as that's right around the corner, right next week. And we'll see you guys then. This has been White Sox Daily.